If we don't have strength, we won't achieve anything, no matter how good things go for us. And if we have strength, we will get out of the worst calamity and get everything we need. It's clear to everyone that if we do not write our own history, someone will write it for us. Because the enemy needs neither our land nor our resources. It tries to erase our identity and impose its quasi-identity on us, which is quite eclectic.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Force, and I'm your host, Miroslava Yarenkin. Knowledge of one's own heroic past is the basis for the formation of patriotism and the strengthening of national identity. Behind this complex wording are hidden things accessible to every Ukrainian, such as knowledge of the historical truth about our country and commemoration of the feats of thousands of Ukrainians who stood in defense of their native land for many years. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the importance of military and patriotic work among the Ukrainian people and the formation of people's knowledge of their own history. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. The study of military history is necessary to clearly show our military and professional endurance. Ukrainians have always fought. Even when there was no Ukrainian statehood, our soldiers fought with dignity in the armies of those states that included Ukrainian lands. There is a purely educational moment, heroic deeds, examples of betrayals, successful or unsuccessful military operations, military leaders, commanders, soldiers, all the things on which the military history on every nation is based. All over the world, the need to know military history is undeniable. Head of the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance, Anton Drobovych, will elaborate more on this.
If a person does not understand the cause and effect relationship in this war, it leads to the fact that in emergency situations when everyone runs to the enlistment office, he runs there too. But when you find yourself on the battlefield with a small unit, a platoon, roughly speaking, something bad happens, and you feel that you might die, just might die, that's where this value backbone manifests itself. The decision is made in a split of a second. If you have worked out and have an answer to the question why I am here and why we must stand on this road or in this intersection, in this trench, you can answer both for yourself and for your men. And if you're a sergeant or a platoon leader, and you can guide them. If you don't have an answer, and there is no crowd around, no lines of people who want to take this trench and hold this intersection, there simply won't be. So you find yourself alone with your values and faith. Accordingly, if it was empty there, it wasn't dealt with because a person might not have dealt with it professionally. They could be, for example, an engineer, a builder, a doctor, etc. And people might have not asked themselves questions, or even be soldiers or officers who had been trained for a long time and were familiar with all the details, but the general level of worldview, for various reasons, does not allow answering these key questions. And here the problem begins. So it's a serious issue. The best units in Ukraine, I assure you, they are working on this. They create relevant methodological materials and manuals. I know that, for example, the Marines and the TRO forces have a military ethos. So it's actually such a small book that tells us who we are, why we're here, and what we're doing here. As far as I remember, there were some methodological developments in Azov in cooperation with the surgeon school. I know that a lot of work is being done, in particular by the officers in the 3rd Assault Company. The historian Alexander Alferov, who is working on it, can tell you more about it. Also, recently we presented a work, a special book, in fact, the ideology of values and practices for the Khartia unit of the National Guard. But all projects appear when the units and the relevant territorial commands of the branches of the armed forces understand that there is a gap and that this area must be strengthened. Very often the answer to what we do here needs to be brought down to the level of a particular unit given its specifics. Because It's one thing if it is TRO. These are mostly yesterday's civilians who came here to defend. And if it's, for example, the National Guard, there are many people who yesterday, for example, guarded state facilities, who did not have appropriate skills and understanding. All these things must be adapted and put into practice. For example, if it is a very privileged unit of the airborne assault troops, which is made up mostly of legionnaires who voluntarily came to Ukraine, the specifics of work there are completely different. But if there is no skeleton, no general framework, for example, there will be no calendar that was mentioned, no general developments that will give a general answer. There will be nothing to plant in the soil of this unit. And there's a quote from Yevhen Konovalets quite often mentioned, who said that if we don't have strength, we won't achieve anything, no matter how good things go for us. And if we have strength, we will get out of the worst calamity and get everything we need. It's a very simple idea. If we have the strength, all we're talking about now is to increase the morale of our army and the readiness of our students, our school children, the whole society for this struggle. Because the outcome is very simple. The Russians have exactly 3 scenarios for us. The first is for us to flee and leave this territory to them. The second is assimilation, they want us to become their new subjects. And the third is death. That's it, 3 options. We have to make a choice. This is a very simple truth, which I deduced through academic observations, but many people can deduce it even more simply, without any articles at all.
Military history is an important component of historical science and at the same time of military science. It is designed to investigate current problems of the history of wars, military art, armed forces, weapons and military equipment, etc. The head of the Military History Research Center of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Colonel Ihor Kosiak, noted the importance of history in the context of not only describing it, but also perpetuating that memory and enduring military traditions of ours, starting with Kievan Rus and ending with the large-scale invasion of the Russian Federation these days. Let's hear what he has to say.
It's clear to everyone that if we do not write our own history, someone will write it for us. Therefore, based on the understanding that the description of military actions, the description and acquisition of historical experience is important, this process has been initiated in the armed forces of Ukraine since 2014, and it acquired a more systematic form in 2022, when the Research Center of Military History, which I represent, was created by the directive of the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The main tasks of the Research Center of Military History are to conduct military historical research on various aspects. These tasks also include military political and military economic areas, the strategy of operative art, as well as tactics of using and conducting combat operations. These tasks are practically implemented in the descriptions we make. Every month, our center publishes a military historical description of the Russian-Ukrainian War. And we published its most recent version in February of this year. They are freely available on the website of our center. As for our heroes, understanding the importance of remembering the people who gave their lives for the freedom and independence of Ukraine, we created a section on our website where 221 heroes of Ukraine have already been listed. In this regard, we closely cooperate with other Ukrainian scientific institutions. We have signed memoranda of cooperation practically with all leading scientific institutions. These are the Institute of History of the National Academy of Sciences and the Institute of National Remembrance, whose spaces we use for our banner exhibitions. Practically all museum institutions of the city of Kiev, etc. In general, the complexity of the center's works lie in the fact that we are engaged not only in describing Russia's large-scale invasion, we are also engaged in museumization and museumification. And therefore, we issued a corresponding methodological manual for the troops. You understand that each combat unit now collects some trophies, some elements of artifacts, which in the future will become part of the exhibitions and museums of the military units. And, of course, in order to develop unified approaches, a unified vision, to move away from those Soviet traditions that still remained in some military units, where uniforms, battle flags with stars, with a hammer and sickle were displayed, we must lay the foundation of our Ukrainian identity. And this identity should be evident in the reflection of the historical events that are currently taking place.
After occupying Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine, the Russian occupation authorities destroyed Ukrainian history textbooks. The very first thing they did in September 2014, when opening military educational institutions in Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk, was to bring in textbooks history of the Russian army. They also fundamentally changed school history textbooks, which we talked about in one of our episodes earlier. In Russia, the study of history is very much controlled by the state. Junior lieutenant and head of the educational and laboratory complex of the Department of Military History of Ukraine, Bohdan Skopnenko, will talk more about Russian war on history and imposing their quasi-identity on Ukrainians on the occupied territories.
The present war waged by Russia against Ukraine is not just a standard conflict between two states over some borderland or some territories. This is an existential war, because the enemy needs neither our land nor our resources. It tries to erase our identity and impose its quasi-identity on us, which is quite eclectic, because their identity combines the concepts that are incompatible for a mentally healthy person. Respect for Stalin as a great manager, canonization of the royal family shot by the same Bolsheviks. That is absolutely incompatible things are combined in some way, and they try to broadcast and impose this quasi-identity on us. And these are not just such thoughts. They are based on their actions in the occupied territories. That is, they destroy our monuments. They rename the streets in those occupied cities. And for many of our fellow citizens, it remains unclear why they do this. And many people today do not even understand why to rename streets today, to do this process. Well, there was a street, for example, Kvitneva or Bluchers, and let it be. People do not understand why to do this, and the enemy understands it very well. And this is probably caused by a shortcoming of us, historians. Perhaps we should take more responsibility. Instead of creating a quality product that will not leave the borders of academic institutions, we need to create such a product that would be adaptive, that would be understandable for the general public, for ordinary people.
You've been watching the special project of Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian War, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information on how to help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!